Welcome to the NTEB Prophecy News Podcast with your host and Bible teacher, Jeffrey Greider. Rightly divided, dispensationally correct, and standing on the authority of the King James Holy Bible. This program is brought to you by NowTheEndBegins.com.
And good evening, everybody. Whoa, nope, it's good afternoon, everybody. Happy Monday, and welcome to this edition of the NTEB Prophecy News Podcast. Today, we're talking about social media. We're talking about the purge that has begun of conservative and Christian voices on social media in places like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Reddit and Pinterest and all those different, and LinkedIn and all those different social media sites. We told you at the beginning of this year that as we get closer and closer to the election, that things are going to start shutting down. They are, all of the social media sites are run by liberals, and they know that in order to affect the election, they have to shut down the free flow of ideas and communications, and they have to greatly alter the national dialogue. And that is exactly what they're doing today. We're going to bring you startling proof, shocking proof, actually, of exactly how deep this purge is and how deep it's going to go, and what you can likely expect to have happen over the next couple of days and certainly the next couple of weeks as we get closer and closer to the election. But let's go to the Lord in prayer and ask for His blessing on today's program. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your goodness and your mercy. We thank you, Lord, for all these that you've gathered. We thank you, Father God, that you've given us a platform that we can gather around, and the entire global Now the End Begins family of Bible believers, Lord, we're able to stay connected. And you have provided this, God, and we're grateful and we're thankful. And Lord, we pray especially for Brother Don Anderson. He's your preacher, Lord, and he's in the hospital. And we just pray, Father God, that you would touch him and give him a healing. And I certainly do ask all of our NTEB listeners to pray for Don Anderson as well. He has COVID, he has double pneumonia, and he has heart problems, and he's in rough shape. So please keep Brother Don Anderson in your prayers. That's very much appreciated by his family. So, Lord, we commit this time to you, and we ask for your blessing, God. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, today when I woke up, I wasn't really quite sure what the podcast was going to be about. Right from the very beginning, I have envisioned that this podcast would be something that's very current and very up to date and kind of, what's happening now type of thing. And so this morning, I was looking on Twitter and seeing all these unbelievably false tweets from the Biden campaign and from Biden supporters, and just the whole sham of this, why they even nominated Joe Biden, he's losing his mind. He is like the worst candidate that you could possibly have. And they're doing that because they really want to put Kamala Harris in as the socialist president. And so all of this that we're seeing now, it's all a big game. It's all a big ruse. The idea is just to get Joe Biden elected, and then they're going to hit him with the 25th Amendment. They're going to declare him incompetent. And you may have read last week that Nancy Pelosi was forming a 25th Amendment committee. And at first we all thought that it was about Donald Trump. And websites all over the internet popped up saying, why is Nancy Pelosi suddenly talking about the 25th Amendment? Here we have from rollcall.com. Why would Speaker Nancy Pelosi unveil legislation less than 1 month before Election Day to establish a commission under the 25th Amendment to determine the president's fitness for holding office? That's the question that many in Washington are asking after Pelosi held a news conference, this is last week, with Maryland Rep. Jamie Raskin, a constitutional scholar and a member of the House Democratic leadership team, to back his bill setting up a commission on presidential capacity to discharge Hold on, I just got a pop-up box right in the middle of reading that sentence. To back up his bill, setting up a commission on presidential capacity to discharge the powers and duties of the office. Wow, that is a mouthful. So this is the name of the commission. It is called the Commission on Presidential Capacity to Discharge the Powers and Duties of the Office. Now, Democrats say that they're simply setting up a process that has been authorized by the Constitution that should have been codified a long time ago, but is especially now needed because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Republicans think Pelosi is continuing the effort she started with impeachment to try and oust Donald Trump. But as we found out by the time we got to the end of the weekend, this Commission on Presidential Capacity to Discharge the Powers and Duties of the Office has nothing to do with Donald Trump. The election's in 3 weeks. This has to do with Joe Biden. They know that they are going to, if Joe Biden wins, they are going to hit him with the 25th Amendment thing so fast, it's going to make your head spin. So what's happening right now? What's happening right now is all of the powers that be have decided to conspire together and make sure that Joe Biden gets elected president so they can hit him with the 25th Amendment. And they already have everything in place right now, and they're going to hit him with the 25th Amendment, and then they're going to put Kamala Harris in as the president, and we are going to have socialism, real hardcore, worse than Bernie Sanders style socialism here in America. And that's what they're doing. That's the plan. That's what's coming. So the people at Facebook and the people at Twitter and the people at Instagram and LinkedIn, every single one of these people are liberal. Now, you could say to me, well, what about the sites where they don't censor, sites like Parler? Yeah, they're not liberals, but not a lot of people go there. When you talk about social media, there's dozens and dozens of social media websites, but there's only a small handful of social media websites that command a real, authentic, global, intensive audience. So, for example, let's go to Google and let's find out how many people are on Facebook in 2020. And let's look at the top 20 Facebook statistics that was updated back in August. And let me see. Facebook has 52,534 employees. Let that sink in for a moment. Facebook has 52,534 employees as of June 30th of this past year. Currently, there are 3.14 billion people actively using Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, or Messenger, all platforms that is owned by Facebook. Worldwide, there are over 2.7 billion monthly active users as of June of last year. So, Facebook is rapidly approaching having 50% of the entire global population on their site. Now, when we say the Facebook site, there is no such thing as a Facebook site. Facebook exists over thousands and tens of thousands of servers. And there is no one place that Facebook is. I've been making websites for the past 20 years, and I have a little bit of an understanding of what it takes to really create a website that can be scalable to allow for large traffic. And even just with Now the End Begins over the past 10 years, we have had to make upgrades consistently. We just had to upgrade our hardware just 2 months ago to handle all the traffic. Now, if that's what we have to do for Now the End Begins, what would you have to do for Facebook that has 3.4 billion people who have created profiles with 2.7 billion active users, people who use Facebook every single day. You have to have a system that is so large and so big that you really can't even imagine the scope of how big Facebook is. It is everywhere. Its tentacles have reached around the entire world. But my first story today is not about Facebook. It's about Twitter. So I got really mad this morning looking at the Biden campaign and all the lies that they tell. And I started thinking about all the disgusting things that Joe Biden stands for, all the disgusting things that he does, and all those videos, and you've seen them on YouTube, all those videos of Joe Biden very inappropriately touching children, talking to children, turning to girls who are 6, 7, and 8, telling them that they can't start dating boys until they're 30, and just really messing with their minds. And you can tell he gets a sick psychological pleasure out of that. So I took a video that was originally broadcast on C-SPAN. No photoshopping, no deep fake, nothing had been changed, no music had been added, nothing. It was simply a montage of videos of Joe Biden as vice president, and he is overseeing the swearing-in ceremonies of the new senators, and that's one of the jobs of the vice president, because the vice president, if you don't know this, the vice president of the United States is also the head of the Senate. And whenever you have a new senator, it is the vice president that swears them in. So all I did was I simply took one of these videos and I posted it to my Twitter account. And within 5 minutes, I received this notification that said this: your account has been locked. What happened? We locked your account for posting content that violates our child sexual exploitation policy. Regardless of intent, posting, retweeting, or linking to such content is strictly prohibited on Twitter. Repeat violation will result in permanent suspension of your account. This is what Twitter said to me this morning. Now, what was it that I posted that they considered to be a violation of their child sexual exploitation policy? Undoctored videos of Joe Biden from C-SPAN swearing in new senators as vice president of the United States and interacting with children. That flagged my post and got my account locked, and they would not unlock my account until I removed the tweet. So here we are, 3 days before the election, the most contentious election, certainly in modern day American history, perhaps in the entire history of our nation. And we have the liberal people at social media trying desperately to keep Joe Biden's name being linked to only favorable things and positive things, even if most of the things that it's linked to are just out and out lies. This is what they're trying to do. Now, what was my reaction? Well, I did what Twitter asked me. I removed the offending tweet of Joe Biden violating the child sexual exploitation policy. I removed it. My account was restored. And then I immediately wrote an article called, "If you post a video of Democrat Joe Biden interacting with children, Twitter now flags it as a violation of their child sexual exploitation policy." So let's see how much farther that I can go on Twitter without being blocked. Because remember, when they sent me the notice that said that my account was locked, they said repeat violations will result in the permanent suspension of your account. Well, we've already had a number of our accounts permanently suspended. The people at Pinterest did not like what we had to say about radical Muslim extremism. and we have posted hundreds of articles exposing Islamic terrorism. Well, Pinterest didn't like that, and they permanently banned our account. I've been on LinkedIn since the very beginning, I would say 2004, 2005, they did not like what I had to say about Black Lives Matter. So after 15 years of having a paid-for LinkedIn social media account, last month they permanently banned me, and under no circumstances, there's not even an option to restore the account. And now I'm on the same type of thin ice with Twitter. And now they are threatening to permanently ban the Now the End Begins Twitter account with our 17,000 followers and our 18.9 thousand tweets that we've made over the last 10 years. So today, I want to talk to you about something that we have said for many, many months now that was going to come, and it is here. There is a purge that is taking place, and it's a purge that, should Joe Biden win, it is going to kick into very high overdrive. And we're going to show you some of the dangers of a Joe Biden presidency, and we're going to show you how social media wants very, very much to control what you and I have to say. Because remember, the liberals who talk about diversity all day long, and that's their number one favorite word, is we've got to have diversity. We have to have diversity. Liberals are the most undiverse group of people that you will ever meet in human history, because they are not diverse. They all have the same opinion. And people who hold a different opinion are blocked, they're banned, they're censored, they're arrested, they're violated, they're kicked out. That's what liberals do. Yesterday we did this article, and it's really a very, very scary thing, talking about social media. Yelp, and that's a consumer review site of restaurants and businesses. Yelp has partnered with the Black Lives Matter people because what they want to do is they want to begin to identify and publicly target businesses that Black Lives Matter has deemed to be racist. And Yelp has agreed to go to the listing of every business, every restaurant that Black Lives Matter has deemed to be a racist business, and they are publicly going to label them as such. Now, you've seen all the videos of, for the past 5 or 6 months, how Black Lives Matter loves to go to restaurants and they surround the patrons who are trying to have their meal outside, and they start screaming Black Lives Matter. They start screaming white privilege, right? And they do all these terrifying things, and they scare people, and they flip over tables, and they do all these things. So now Yelp wants to take all that, and they want to streamline that process, and they want to turn the Yelp website into a place where businesses who disagree with Black Lives Matter can be easily and instantly targeted for riots, for picketing, for looting, for burning. Black Lives Matter in the past 6 months has caused over $2 billion worth of damage. It is the most high-profile riots that this country has ever seen. There has never been a organized riot in this country that has caused more damage than Black Lives Matter. So that's a very dubious distinction to have, but that is what they have. So Yelp is going to, what do they call it? They call it businesses accused of racist behavior. And this is what they are posting on the profile page of every business that Black Lives Matter has accused them, not found them guilty of, but has simply made the accusation. This is what it's going to say on their profile. It's going to say this. Business accused of racist behavior. Recently, someone associated with this business was accused of racist behavior, resulting in an influx of people posting their views to this page. Racism is reprehensible and has no place on Yelp, and we unequivocally reject racism in any form. So that's what they're going to do. And you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me, if you study about the brown shirts and Kristallnacht in Nazi Germany and how they used to go to the businesses of the Jews and they would take chalk and they would take soap and they would write on the front of the buildings, Achtung Juden, which means warning Jew. And then they would make them wear the yellow stars, and then they would throw the bricks through the window. And that's exactly what Hitler's brown shirts wanted to do, and that's how Hitler came into power. And Antifa, Black Lives Matter, the Sunrise Movement, the Occupy movement, these people are the brown shirts of the 21st century. But when you think about how big a website like Yelp is and how much influence that they have over people, I have heard stories of people. We have a pizza place here in St. Augustine called Pizza Time, and they make really good pizza. It's very delicious. Well, a couple of years ago, they got a really, really good review on social media, and then almost overnight, there was a line of people waiting outside of Pizza Time to get pizza. And I can remember getting pizza there before they got that review and trying to get pizza there after they got that review. It made their business skyrocket. And that's how powerful social media is. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about the history and the timeline of social media. But the point that I'm trying to make is that when Pizza Time got that review, their business, I don't know how much bigger that it got, but it went from being busy to having a line of 20 people wrapped around the block every single day. So just imagine if that's what a good review would do. Think about what a bad review would do. A bad review would have less people going to your business, would have less people wanting to try your food or your product or whatever it was. Now, you have a good review, you have a bad review. Now, try to imagine your business with a site that has as much influence as Yelp, labeling your profile on Yelp as business accused of racist behavior. What would happen? You would have bricks being thrown through your window. You would have Black Lives Matter people out in front. And they would be protesting. They would be harassing your people. And this is what Yelp is doing. And it's scary. And it should be scary. But this is where we are. So we told you back in January and February of this year, we told you that this was coming. And with each passing month, it's gotten worse and worse and worse. And now here we are just 3 weeks away from the election, and it is begin to heat up into overdrive. Listen to this clip from Fox News. This is from 2 years ago. But listen to what this Google ex-employee has to say about how Silicon Valley blacklists conservatives. Take a listen to this.
Let's get right to him. This man is the fired Google engineer. He'd sent a company-wide memo on diversity. His name is James Damore, and he's with us now. James, welcome to the program.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Am I right in saying that you were fired because you suggested that biology may be the reason why there are not more women in high positions in technology? You made that case. That's why you were fired, correct?
Correct.
Okay. What did you say about it? I mean, what reasoning did you give?
So the largest difference between men and women in personality is the differing interest in people versus things, and that's been linked to prenatal testosterone. And that difference plays a large role in occupational preference. So there are simply fewer women that are interested in technology.
Are you allowed to say, and I use that word cautiously, are you allowed to say in this day and age that there are fundamental differences between men and women in terms of personality? That's what you said, and that's why you canned.
Yeah, in some circles you can definitely say that, and for many it's common sense, but at least at Google there was a strong dogma that no, there are no innate differences. It's all due to sexism and differential treatment to women. And if we can only fix society, then we would have 50-50 representation. So it was sort of forbidden knowledge at Google, but it's common sense to many.
What are you doing now?
I'm still trying to figure that out, actually.
Well, have you become a political person in your own right? Are you advancing your ideas separate from Google? Is that what you're doing?
A little bit, and I'm still trying to fix Google in some ways. I still have influence, and I can still try to change some of their policies to make it simply just a better culture for everyone.
Well, another point that you made in your memorandum was that Google sort of aces out conservative thinkers and conservative points of view. Is that part of what you'd like to change?
Right, and there's many cases within Silicon Valley where we even have blacklists where if someone shows that they're a conservative, then they'll be blacklisted between different companies and different teams. And that really needs to change. That
would be the subject of a lawsuit, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and there are a couple, I think.
Okay. James, I'm terribly sorry. I have to leave you. I've got...
So there you have an ex-employee from Google, and he got fired because he dared to hold the outrageous position that men and women are not the same, and that men and women think differently, and that more men are interested in technology than women are. Those are all extremely common sense things, and yet Google fired him for holding that position. And then as you heard the interview go further, he began to say that there is an absolute blacklist within Google of a conservative perspective. And we know that to be true. We've been writing about that for years now. So this is what is happening with social media right before the most contentious election that we've ever had in American history. Now, I want you to think for a moment about what it would be like to have a Joe Biden presidency. I want you to think about some of the changes that would take place in America if Joe Biden was president. And when I tell you what these changes are, you're going to see very, very quickly why the liberals are so excited to be working to rig the system to get Joe Biden elected. Number one, medical tyranny. Biden and his handlers will enact mandatory face mask rules and nationwide vaccine compliance rules. Those who refuse to comply will be banned from working, using public transportation, or appearing in public places. So, Joe Biden has said many, many times, I've heard him, you've heard him, that if he's president, he is going to make mask wearing mandatory. He is going to make vaccines compulsory. And if you don't wear the mask and don't take the vaccine, they are going to prevent you from leaving your house. And this is common knowledge. He has said this many, many, many times. The second thing that a Joe Biden candidacy would do is the Democrats will pack the court. They will expand the number of U.S. Supreme Court justices to whatever number that they need in order to achieve a liberal majority. Because Democrats always cheat. If they can't win by following the rules, they just change the rules. Joe Biden currently says that voters will have to elect him first to find out if he is going to pack the courts or not. And we did this story just Friday or Saturday, and it was outrageous. He was asked in an interview if he would pack the courts with liberals, and he said that he categorically would not answer that question until he was elected president. And Kamala Harris has been asked that question multiple times by Mike Pence. She refused to answer. Joe Biden refused to answer. And the reason why they're refusing is because they absolutely will begin to add liberals to the Supreme Court. And they are going to increase the number of judges until they have a liberal majority. The third thing that a Joe Biden candidacy would bring about is if you're a climate denier, it's going to become a criminal act. So-called climate deniers will be criminalized, and any who deny the climate change narrative in their online posts or speech will be arrested, prosecuted, and imprisoned under Kamala Harris, who has openly promised to do exactly this. And even though that Joe Biden denied when he debated Donald Trump, he said that the Green New Deal was not his deal. It absolutely, no question about it, it is. If you go to the Joe Biden website, and let's go there just for a second. Let's go to joebiden.com. If you go to joebiden.com and you go to the section on climate, what do we see? Where is the section on climate? Joe's vision, Joe's story, Kamala's story, volunteer. Where is it here? I probably should have found this before the program, but it is here somewhere. But on Joe Biden's website, he says that the foundation of, here it is, the Biden plan for climate change. Where is it? The Biden plan for climate change. Joe Biden believes the Green New Deal is a crucial framework for meeting the challenges we face. It powerfully captures two basic truths that are at the core of his plan, and blah, 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 blah. But you can go to joebiden.com and you can go to joebiden.com and you can check that out. And he says that the Green New Deal is a crucial framework for meeting the climate challenges that we face, even though during the debate with Donald Trump, he denied that that was his position. Now, why? Why would Joe Biden deny that the Green New Deal was the centerpiece of his climate plan? Because he knows how radical that it is. Let me see if I can quickly find out some of the hallmarks of the Green New Deal. Let's see if we go Green New Deal bullet points. What comes up there? Meeting 100% of the power demand in the United States through zero-emission energy sources. Let me translate that for you. They're going to get rid of fossil fuels, and they're going to make everybody drive an electric car, which in theory sounds pretty good until you realize there is not nearly enough electricity for everyone in America to drive electric cars. How many of you have seen electric vehicle charging stations? I've seen one. I have seen one electric charging station in downtown St. Augustine. It was there for about 6 months and they took it out. Now, think of all the hundreds of millions of cars that we have in America right now. Think of the lines that you see at the gas stations that exist. There's no electric stations. There's no place to easily charge. Yeah, the Tesla people, but they're mostly charging their batteries inside their own garages. There is almost no framework for rolling out electric recharging stations. That does not exist. But that is what they're going to do. They're going to mandate that every skyscraper in America suddenly becomes Green New Deal regulated. And that's going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars. People can't afford to do that. But so the Green New Deal is an absolute fascist approach to climate change. And Joe Biden knows that. And that's why he refused to be connected with it during the debate. Number 4, medical dictatorship. You will be subject to endless lockdowns and made a prisoner in your own home while the left-wing media keeps declaring new cases of COVID has been found. This will be used to utterly crush the middle class and end any constitutional freedoms remaining in America. And that is absolutely true. And I have friends who live in New Jersey and I have friends who live in California, and they tell me that it is a nightmare in those states where it's being run by Democratic mayors and governors. And they are California is still shutting down churches. And it is very bad and it is very scary. If Joe Biden and Kamala Harris become president, you are going to see, if you thought that the mandatory mask wearing was bad, and let me ask you this question. We have heard how Bill Gates demands that everyone around the world wears a mask. He has been on endless talk shows demanding that people wear a mask. So I went to Google the other day and I typed in Bill Gates wearing mask, and I found nothing. I could not find one photograph of Bill Gates anywhere wearing a COVID mask. If you have one, send it to me. If you have one, post it right here in the chat room. And if you find it later, send it to me, info@nowtheendbegins.com. I want to see it. But as far as I know right now, there are no photos of Bill Gates wearing a mask, even though he demands that you and I wear one. Now, I want you to listen to this clip from Tucker. It's from a couple months ago, talking about how big tech has launched an attack on your rights. Take a listen to Tucker.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. As Washington fusses over the Russia hoax for a third year in a row, a lot of other things are happening that don't get the attention they deserve. For example, the big tech companies have launched their fiercest attack yet on your right as an American to follow your conscience and to say what you believe. Unlike earlier generations of authoritarians, the tech moguls don't say any of this out loud. They're not honorable enough to state their intentions clearly. Instead, they drape censorship in the soothing banality of HR department cliches. Listen here to Mark Zuckerberg explain that the death of free speech in America is actually a really positive thing that we all need to get behind.
We're taking a more proactive role in making sure that all of our partners and developers use our services for good. We're very focused on making sure that our recommendations and discovery surfaces aren't highlighting groups where people are repeatedly sharing misinformation or harmful content, and we're working hard to completely remove groups if they exist primarily to violate our policies or do things that are dangerous.
Who knew fascism could be so chirpy? Groups that do things that are dangerous. What exactly does that mean? Dangerous like hurting other people? Or dangerous as in saying things that Mark Zuckerberg doesn't like or considers bad for business? Well, yesterday we found out Facebook released its latest enemies list. Alex Jones, Milo Yiannopoulos, Paul Joseph Watson, Louis Farrakhan, Laura Loomer, all of them were designated dangerous individuals and banned from Facebook and from its subsidiary Instagram. Alex Jones's company InfoWars was banned as well and described as a dangerous organization. Didn't explain exactly how. How dangerous is InfoWars? Well, Facebook believes it's so dangerous that you can be banned from using the platform, Facebook, just for sharing its content unless you simultaneously denounce it. Let that penetrate for just one moment. Think about it just for a second. Mark Zuckerberg is not simply censoring opinions. He's prescribing which political opinions you're allowed to have, which conversations all of us in this country can have about America. Keep in mind that nobody voted for Mark Zuckerberg. He's 34 years old. He's completely cut off from reality. He's worth $72 billion. And yet he can single-handedly make our First Amendment irrelevant after 250 years. Here's the most amazing thing of all. Our media think that's great. Now, journalists are supposed to defend free speech. You would think that was their job, since they make a living from it. But when corporate America issues an order, when Mark Zuckerberg says jump, their question is, how high, Mr. Zuckerberg? Listen to them celebrate Mark Zuckerberg and sell you out completely.
Why are they doing this now?
Well, it's a good question as to why they waited this long, but
yes, exactly.
Yeah, so Alex Jones has been banned from Facebook for a long period of time, but now they banned him. They banned his little underling, Paul Joseph Watson.
Now that they kicked them off the platform, that's great for now, but it doesn't roll back the clock.
Well, you have also excesses in the First Amendment and the Second Amendment right now. I don't think that the forefathers said, well, you can say, all sorts of hateful things and spread it around the world, literally spread it through the Internet.
I have no issue with it at all. I want them shut down. I want them silenced. I want them muted. I think they are horrible for our society.
I want them shut down. I want them silenced. I want them muted. But don't worry. These people aren't terrifying or anything. Don't kid yourself. It's not just Alex Jones they want silenced, muted, shut down. Recently, the Poynter Institute, which is a nonprofit that's supposed to support journalism, put out a list of what they called unreliable news outlets. Can you imagine unreliable? Self-awareness in short supply in the journalism business. But Poynter crafted this list with the help of the Southern Poverty Law Center. So you can imagine who made the list. The Washington Free Beacon, the Daily Caller, the Daily Signal, the Washington Examiner. Basically everyone who's not CNN or MSNBC or precisely aligned with their politics. Poynter called for advertisers to blacklist and therefore bankrupt these news outlets. Crush them. Their fellow progressives applauded. As far as they're concerned, this is total war. What we're watching now in real time is this country become unfree. So the question is, who exactly is defending us in all of this? Us who might dissent from Mark Zuckerberg's view or think that NBC News maybe doesn't tell the whole truth all the time, or don't trust Mark Zuckerberg to control what we think. What about us? Who's standing up for us? Where are leaders in Congress? Where's the White House? Nowhere. As long as big tech isn't hassling them personally and directly, as long as their accounts remain open, they don't seem to care. They're fools. Will any of these people get reelected in a country where left-wing tech companies control the terms of political debate? Can you really win a presidential election if Google opposes you? No, you can't. Not a chance. Not right now. Without free speech, there is no democracy. It's time to stop lying about that.
And you heard Tucker mention a group called the Southern Poverty Law Center. And he talked about all the people that they have put on their list as being anti-government or anti-American or hate speech or whatever term that they want to use. Well, back in 2016, the Southern Poverty Law Center put Now the End Begins on their list of active anti-government groups. And we took that as a badge of honor. I'm glad that we're on their list because that means that we're standing for something. That means that we're standing for the truth. So if you work at the Southern Poverty Law Center, thank you for putting Now the End Begins on your list. We are not anti-government, but we are anti-fascist in the actual sense of the word, not like Antifa, who mangles that word. Now, let's talk for a moment about social media. This is not something that can be easily dismissed or easily fluffed off. And I want to give you a little bit of a timeline of social media so that you can really, really begin to understand how dangerous that it is to have social media censorship to the degree that we have it right now. In the book of Daniel, chapter 12, verses 1 through 4, Daniel 12, 1 through 4 says this, And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble. That's Jacob's trouble from Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 7. Such as never was since there was a nation even to that same time. That's Matthew 24. And at that time thy people, the Jews, shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. So, let me, over the next couple of minutes, just give you a very quick timeline of how technology has changed how we live as human beings. In 1939, a man by the name of Robert Cornelius took the world's very first selfie. And I just put that picture into the chat room. You can go to Google and you can just type in Robert Cornelius and his image will come right up. So you have the beginning of human history back to Genesis chapter 1, all the way to the first part of the 19th century. In 1839, you have the world's first selfie being taken. Flash forward from 1839 to 1890, the telephone is invented. And the telephone freaked a lot of people out. The idea of having a magic box where you could hold a handle and put an earpiece to your head and put something in front of your mouth, and you could talk with people who were 3,000 miles away from you. The telephone scared a lot of people. But in 1890, the telephone was invented. In 1891, we have the radio. Then you go all the way from 1891 to the 1940s. And based on the telephone, they are now building the world's first computers in the early 1940s. Then you go to the 1960s and the very beginnings of what would become the internet begins to show up. And in 1968, you have a intranet that was created for the U.S. military so that they could send messages to each other. That's where email comes from. Then you go to 1994, and now you have the advent of the cheap, affordable, Windows-based personal computer. That's where I got in. I got excited by that. I went out in 1994 and bought my first system that had a 732 megabyte hard drive. And within 2 years, I was teaching myself how to make websites. So I've been making websites like Now the End Begins. I make that website. I've been making websites almost since the very beginning of the Windows computer. That's about 25 years now. And then you go to 1997, and now you have the very first social networking site is created. It's a website called 6 Degrees. Nobody recalls it. Within a year, that would be shut down. Flash forward to the year 2002. LinkedIn is born. And I told you a little while ago that they recently banned my profile because of the statements that I make about exposing Black Lives Matter and Antifa. But in 2002, you have LinkedIn was created, and that was created to help people find jobs. And LinkedIn right now is a very large and very, very powerful website. The same year that LinkedIn was created, a website, and some of you may recall this, called Friendster was launched. And then within a few months, Friendster had reached over 3 million users. And this is the very beginning of modern day social media taking place in the early 2000s. The very next year, photo sharing site called PhotoBucket is launched. and millions of people began to share their photos on PhotoBucket. The same year, a website called MySpace. I very briefly, for about 5 minutes, I had a MySpace profile, and it was ridiculous. It was just a bunch of teenagers sharing pictures of inappropriate people doing inappropriate things, and I got on there and off there in about 30 seconds. So that was MySpace. But then the very next year, Facebook went live. And do you remember the very beginning days of Facebook where you had to have a college email account? And if you didn't have an active college email account, you couldn't register for Facebook. Well, they got over that very, very quickly. And within 1 year after that, in 2005, they opened it up to the general public. That same year, photo sharing site called Flickr is launched, and digital camera sales began to skyrocket. Facebook started having Facebook ads, and Mark Zuckerberg began to smell exactly how much money that there was to be made. He is currently worth about $90 billion personally right now. In the year 2005, the world's angriest website, Reddit, was launched, and the Reddit founder would go on to commit suicide because of all of the comments and the things that people would post and the threats and all those things. He couldn't take it. And so the man that created Reddit wound up committing suicide because of Reddit. That same year, 2005, YouTube was born. Remember that? Remember saying, hey, isn't this just like America's funniest home videos? And now YouTube in 2020 has well over 1 billion video views every single day. In the same year, 2005, MySpace reached 22 million users, and it was growing at a rate of 2 million new users per month. The very next year, Google buys YouTube for $1.6 billion with a B dollars. That same year, 2006, Twitter went live. Facebook Newsfeed went live in September of 2006. And then in 2007, we have the invention of the hashtag, which, when I was a kid, using a push-button phone, we used to call that the pound symbol or the pound sign. It looks like you're playing tic-tac-toe. But in 2007, it became the hashtag. The very next year, 2008, Spotify went live. Everybody has a Spotify music account. The year after that, 2009, Facebook introduces the like button. Now, what's interesting about the like button, that was invented or created by a former Facebook engineer by the name of Justin Rosenstein. And he pulled an all-nighter to build a prototype of Facebook's like button. But then after he lived with it for a while and he saw the damage that it does psychologically, he began to publicly speak against Facebook. He began to publicly speak against the like button, and he refuses to allow any of his children to use social media. So that tells you how damaging psychologically these type of things are. 2009, Facebook surpasses MySpace in user count for the very first time. Facebook, same year, announced that they had positive cash flow. And Mark Zuckerberg begins his road to being one of the top 5 most wealthy persons in the world. In 2010, Pinterest went live. In 2010, Instagram went live. In 2011, Snapchat. And then in 2012, Facebook buys Instagram for $1 billion. They have since gone on to buy WhatsApp as well. So Facebook is Facebook, Messenger, Instagram, and WhatsApp. October of 2012, Facebook reaches 1 billion active users. They thought that could never be done. I told you a couple of minutes ago that Facebook has 3.4 billion profiles with 2.7 billion active users in 2020. In December of 2012, Twitter hits 140 million active users. In 2013, Snapchat users are now sending 60 million snaps per day. In 2013, MySpace relaunches with a new website and a new mobile app. In 2014, Instagram reaches 200 million active users. In 2015, Snapchat reaches 100 million active users. In 2015, Facebook enables GIFs. 2015, Friendster shut down. In 2015, Snapchat rolled out filters, which everybody has filters now. In 2016, Instagram announced it had reached 500 million active users. In 2016, Time magazine buys MySpace. Also in 2016, Snapchat rebrands itself as Snap. 2018, it turns out that Cambridge Analytica harvests troves of user data from Facebook, and Facebook stock plummets. And so here we are in 2020. And I didn't even mention TikTok, which has been in the news, and President Trump said that it's a company that had to be broken up, and all this stuff and all this controversy around TikTok. So why did I just take the last 10 minutes and give you a little bit of a timeline on social media? Because there's something that you need to understand about social media that most people, most Christians, because not a lot of Christians use a lot of social media. Some do and some don't. But because a lot of Christians are not active on social media, they don't understand it. And a lot of people tend to just wave their hand and they dismiss it as kind of like this frivolous thing. And what I'm trying to get you to understand is that it is not frivolous. Social media controls the conversation of the entire world right now in October of 2020. And I'll say that again. Social media controls the conversation of the entire world. Over the past 15 years, everybody has gotten a smartphone. I only know one actual literal person, an adult, who's a friend of mine. I only personally know one person that does not own a smartphone. Everybody else that I know has a smartphone of some kind. So the point that I'm trying to get you to understand is when you hear people talk about social media, don't roll your eyes or wave your hand or say that's just silliness and, I'm not going to get involved with that. Believe me when I tell you the entire world's conversation, public conversation, is controlled by social media. So it's very, very, very important that we understand what is being controlled and how that control and how that power is being used to weaponize public conversation. Now, one of the things that our founding fathers had decreed hundreds of years ago was that in America you had to have a free and open press, that the people who report the news could not be prevented from telling everybody else what's going on. You know how one way that you can find out if the church that you go to is a cult? If they tell you that you're not allowed to read certain books, if they tell you that you're not allowed to listen to certain types of music, if they tell you that there are things that exist that you are not allowed to listen to or to read or to expose you. And I'm not talking about bad things or filthy things or anything like that. I am talking about if you're part of an organization, any type of organization, but especially part of a church that tells you, oh, you can't read that book because we don't want you being exposed to that. That's a cult. And when you look at dictators as they rise to power, you have Stalin and Lenin and Pol Pot, you have Mussolini, you have Hitler, you have Castro. Wherever you see dictators rising to power, the very first thing that they do is they put the media under the control of the state, and they control what you listen to. They control what you see, and they don't want you to be exposed to the truth. Now, you heard Tucker say that if Google doesn't want you to become president, it's very, very hard to win an election. Now, that clip was from like a year ago, and it has gotten 10 times worse since Tucker first made that comment. Do you remember back in 2016 when Hillary was running for president and Eric Schmidt, one of the founders of Google, he decided that he was going to rewrite some of the algorithms so it would show favorable results to Hillary Clinton? If you have time later today, just go to Google and type in anything, like type in Hillary Clinton Benghazi, type in Joe Biden molesting children, and whatever results that you find, they are a fraction of the results that originally you used to be able to find. Every single day, 7 days a week, I go to places like Google and I research these stories that we do. Sometimes I'll spend way more time researching the story than actually creating and writing the story. And what I have found over the last 10, 12, 16 months is that it is getting harder and harder and harder to find facts. If you Google Donald Trump, the first dozen results that you get are all going to be inherently negative. But if you Google Joe Biden, the first dozen results that you get are going to be inherently positive. And it's getting harder and harder to find stories and pictures and articles related to how things actually happened. And so what places like Google, right? Google, there has never been in all of human history, from a worldly secular perspective, there has never existed a company in human history that has had the power that Google has right now. Do you remember years ago when they had something that was called the search engine wars, and there were search engines called Ask Jeeves? Remember that one? It had the picture of the old-fashioned English butler, and you go to askjeeves.com and you type in what you want to know. And there was a whole bunch of other search engine sites. And then Google comes along. Remember, there was Yahoo. Remember how big Yahoo was? Yahoo is a shadow of what they used to be. And why? Because Google has become so big and so large that the search engine wars have ended. And yeah, you can tell me, well, I use DuckDuckGo or someplace like that, and those sites are pretty good. But Google has more traffic in one day than DuckDuckGo has in 12 months. There is no website on the face of this earth that is bigger, more powerful, or more influential than Google. They are the number one influencer in this lost, sin-cursed world. And they are controlling the conversation, and they are constantly updating and rewriting their algorithms to reflect the type of results that they want you to have. So how does that work? That works when you go to google.com and you type in something like Joe Biden, right? I'm just going to do it right now. I'm on Google and I'm typing in Joe Biden, and I'm just typing in his first name. And what pops up? Oh, donate to Joe and Kamala today. Second one is Joe Biden for president. Third one is Joe Biden Twitter. The fourth one is Joe Biden Wikipedia. And then it goes on and on. New York Times, Joe Biden, who he is and what he stands for. And as you go down the list, it is nothing but fluff pieces that are overwhelmingly positive, that are telling you what a great guy that Joe Biden is. I am on the third page of results right now, and I still haven't found one negative article or even one article that questions should he be our next president. I am on page 4 of results. Joe Biden's campaign summed up in one simple gesture. It's positive. Houston Chronicle, we recommend Joe Biden for president. And you just click on through, and it is nothing but positive information. Now, let's try the same thing for Donald Trump. We type in Donald Trump, enter. And what do we see? We see Donald Trump's Twitter account. We see the Donald Trump website. And then it begins to get very negative very fast. And the hypocrisy between the two people, it's glaring. It's unbelievably glaring. But this is what Google does, and they are effectively controlling how we think. They're controlling how we act and react, and they are preventing us from seeing the truth, and they're only allowing us to talk about those things that they want us to talk about. Take a listen to this. This was from the Laura Ingraham show, talking about how tech giants censor conservative speech. Take a listen to Laura Ingraham.
Time now for our Defending the First series, where we expose the enemies of the First Amendment, free expression, and free thought. The Media Research Center released a devastating report today documenting the censorship of conservative speech by Silicon Valley's tolerant tech giants. Among the findings, claims from former employees that Facebook hides conservative content from the trending section were backed up by a detailed study. Google, YouTube, and Twitter partner with leftist groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center that hate conservatives. And check this out. Of the 25 members on the panel that guides Twitter's policies, 12 are liberals, and there's only one conservative. I can't believe there's one. Shocking, well, but not surprising, is it? For more details, we're joined by Brent Bozell, founder of the very important, indispensable Media Research Center. Brent, first of all, it's great to have you. First appearance on the show, man.
How are you?
Where have you been? Tell us what you found.
Well, it's a massive study done by my colleagues Dan Gaynor and Ashley Goldenberg. It's 50 pages documenting what conservatives have been suggesting has been happening. It sounds hyperbolic, but Laura, this is true. This is the emerging, the greatest censorship of free speech worldwide in the history of man. And let me explain this. The left is on a jihad against conservative thought. It's happening in academia, in entertainment, in business, religion, everywhere. Everywhere where they're attacking, they're suppressing conservative thought. Now they're going to the social media giants. These social media giants have audiences in the billions. And what we've shown in this massive report is whether it's Facebook or Twitter or Google or YouTube, they're all employing different tactics to go against conservatives.
Let's go through some of them. We have a full screen on this. Censorship of conservative speech. Here's some examples. Google search aids Democrats, and study found that 2016 campaign searches were biased in favor of Hillary Clinton. YouTube shutting down conservative channels by mistake by removing videos that promote right-wing political views. And tech companies Facebook and Google are relying on anti-conservative fact-checkers like Snopes and Wikipedia. Now, why is Wikipedia, for our viewers out there, why is that a left-wing?
Well, if you look at so many things Wikipedia does, it puts a liberal spin against conservatives on a regular basis.
We always have to edit my page. Well, I know that.
Well, I've had to do it. I've had to
right?
do it a million times.
I've stopped looking. It's easier that way.
They just insert right. Nasty stuff about you. No, they've been partnering. YouTube has been partnering with them to unmask conservatives and to go against conservative content and to uncover these awful conservatives and what they're doing.
You say that war is being declared on the conservative movement and conservatives are losing badly. If the right is silenced, billions of people will be cut off from conservative ideals. It goes on, but we'll just stop it there. That's really true, isn't it? Because even though the Soviets suppressed speech, China suppresses speech, we're talking about, in effect, a global effort to suppress or silence conservatives. I mean, you've seen, the nonsense that's happened to shows like mine. They try to do it with Rush and others. This is what they do. They don't want to debate because they're losing on the substance, are they not? They want to silence. But with the power of high tech, Brent, what can we, the consumers of information and others watching, what can they do?
Well, the first thing you have to do is recognize what is going on right now. Jack Dorsey is the CEO of Twitter. He put these things in its right perspective. Just recently, he promoted an article that called for the destruction of the conservative movement. Promoted it.
Yeah, he retweeted it.
So it's not just happening in the United States. It's all over the world that the left is militant. Conservatives have to recognize this, and conservatives have to start looking for new homes.
Our own platforms?
I think we're going to have to do
groups that hold them accountable.
But Mark Zuckerberg knows if conservative leads, if they leave, the business model for these social media giants collapses.
Use your power with businesses, high tech, everybody.
Congratulations that your audience is up 20% ever since they went after you.
Well, there was always a glass half full here on the Ingram angle. Brent, thank you. We're gonna link this up on my Facebook page. Everybody needs to read it and support the efforts that you're doing. I don't know what we'd do without Media Research Center, frankly. Thank you so much.
The fifth reason why a Joe Biden presidency is going to be absolutely awful, they want to defund the police. Police departments under a Joe Biden presidency will be defunded nationwide, leading to a collapse in the rule of law across every major U.S. city. This, in turn, will lead to chaos and violence as criminals run free, supported by left-leaning district attorneys and left-wing politicians. Remember, they want to replace the cops with criminals because the criminals will carry out the jobs that the Democrats need done in order to make money from criminal operations like child trafficking, drug running, gun running, kidnapping, political assassinations, etc. Now, if you think that I exaggerate, we have all read the stories of what's been happening in Seattle and in Portland and how these people have been burning down whole city blocks. In Seattle, 2 women were raped. In St. Louis and Portland and in other cities across America, over 13 people have been shot and killed by Black Lives Matter and Antifa people. And these people they're arrested, they're let out on bail almost immediately. And groups... What is the name of that? There is some group in Michigan or Minnesota that has raised over $20 million to bail out the looters the moment that they get arrested. And so these are the same people that want to defund the police. Number 6, they want to reverse Trump-era nominees on the federal courts. Number 7, a nationwide ban on all AR-15s and similar semi-automatic firearms. Number 9, there's going to be rolling blackouts as the power grid begins to fail. If Joe Biden and Kamala Harris gain power and they begin to shut down our natural gas plants and the coal plants and all these other areas where we currently produce power from fossil fuels, You are going to see absolute rolling blackouts and power grid failures as far too many people begin to use the power grid and it can't support them. And it's going to lead to business shutdowns and a massive wave of unemployment and bankruptcy. Number 10, agricultural collapses leads to mass famine. Why? Because the Green New Deal combined with renewed federal regulations and COVID lockdowns that target farms and food-producing facilities will lead to a catastrophic collapse in food production across America. With combustion engines banned, farms will have to resort to animal-powered plows and harvesting operations that will collapse food production back to the 19th century levels. This will result in a 90+% plunge in food output, unleashing mass famine across the country. Number 11, they want to end the Senate filibuster. Why is that a bad thing? Well, if the Democrats gain control of the Senate, they will end the Senate filibuster and use their newfound majority to ram through every radical law and court appointment that they can possibly imagine. And this is where they will do the court packing as well. This is perhaps the most important reason, the end of free speech for America. Now, we've been telling you throughout this entire program why censorship is a bad thing. And I have tried to take out the time and to give you the timeline of social media and to show you how powerful and pervasive that social media is in 2020. It controls not just our nationwide narrative. Social media controls the global narrative. And that's why you have nations like China, communist China, and they censor everything. And people like Google and people like Apple and people like the National Basketball Association and LeBron James, they are willing to put up with the censorship because China pays them and they make a lot of money from China. America would no longer be a nation that had free speech. We barely have free speech right now. Alex Jones was deplatformed. I am not an Alex Jones fan, but I am not a fan of censorship either. Alex Jones has the right to his opinions, wrong as some of them may be, but the idea that he is deplatformed from Facebook and deplatformed from YouTube and Twitter, that's not right. Because if they can get rid of him, they can get rid of me. And if they can get rid of me, they can get rid of you. Free speech is free speech. And the whole point to free speech is not that you have the right to say what I agree with. The whole point to free speech is that you have the right to say something that I disagree with. You have the right to say things that might be highly inflammatory. But that is why the Founding Fathers put free speech as the First Amendment. And that's why they put the right to bear arms as the Second Amendment. Why? Because the First Amendment is protected with the Second Amendment. And when the only way our Founding Fathers knew that governments quite often become tyrannical and they turn against the people. We've watched it happen in Venezuela. We've watched it happen in Cuba. We watched it happen in Italy. We watched it happen in Germany. We watched it happen in Russia and China. So there is an absolute precedent for understanding that governments can turn on the people. And one of the things that our Founding Fathers put into the Constitution was the right of free speech. So when I say things like Black Lives Matter is a domestic terrorist organization, I have the right to say that. That is protected under our Constitution. But the people who own social media do not want you to exercise that right. So LinkedIn last month, they blocked me out of my profile that I have had in an unbroken succession since about 2005. Not only that, I have had a paid premium profile since 2005. And after 4 months of posting articles exposing Black Lives Matter, LinkedIn severed our 15-year premium relationship. And why? Because on LinkedIn, I do not have freedom of speech. On Twitter this morning, I was not allowed to post a video showing you from C-SPAN an undoctored video of Joe Biden interacting with children. And Twitter said that that violated their child sexual exploitation policy. And all it was a video of Joe Biden swearing in people to the U.S. Senate and interacting with their children. Twitter said, I do not have the right to tell people that Joe Biden did those things. And again, these aren't doctored videos. These aren't secret videos. This wasn't taken with a spy camera. They are videos that were taken from C-SPAN. But Twitter said today that I do not have the right to do that. So, while Trump and the GOP are beginning to push back against big tech censorship and the criminalization of conservative speech, under a Biden presidency, big government would merge with the big tech that we've just been talking about for the last 45 minutes. And big government, big Biden government, is going to merge with big tech, and they are going to create a fascist, anti-free speech wall of tyranny. And if you begin to criticize people like Kamala Harris, that we have criticized her constantly, Joe Biden, we have criticized him constantly, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, we have exposed them and criticized them constantly. If Joe Biden and Kamala Harris become the president, that's not going to be allowed. And voices like ours at Now the End Begins are going to be silenced. Now, they can't take down my website. Well, technically, I guess if it got bad enough, they could issue a court order, and they could go to the company that I have my server with, and they could tell them that the court order says that they have to shut me down. So could that, I mean, that is real. If that happened, we would be seeing the internment camps. We would be seeing that as well. But listen to what Kamala Harris said about the riots back in June on the Stephen Colbert Show.
Clear that I know that there are protests still happening in major cities across the United States. I'm just not seeing the reporting on it that I had
that's right.
for the first few weeks.
That's right. But they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop. And they're not. This is a movement. I'm telling you, they're not going to stop. And everyone beware, because they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And that should be, everyone should take note of that on both levels, that they're not going to let up, and they should not. And we should not.
Now, if Joe Biden wins, that voice that you just heard will be president in under 6 months. The 25th Amendment panel that Nancy Pelosi is creating right now, it's not conspiracy theory. She is actively creating the 25th Amendment panel, and she is not creating it for Donald Trump. She is creating it for Joe Biden. That woman that you just heard threatening you that the riots will not stop, they cannot stop, they must not stop. I want you to imagine what it would be like with that woman as president. Now the End Begins would be gone almost overnight. But all free speech would be gone. And what you would have is it would be replaced by the thought police. And what you would have is you would have Black Lives Matter being justified and promoted by the federal government. And those riots that you see would be happening everywhere. And this is what you would hear on a Friday night going out with your friends for coffee downtown. That's what you're going to hear every single night in your city streets, in your downtown streets. Right now here in Florida, Black Lives Matter is targeting the old folks in St. Petersburg. My grandmother used to live in St. Petersburg decades ago. St. Petersburg, Florida is a beautiful part of Florida, but it's filled with people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s. And that's exactly why Black Lives Matter is there right now. And they are, if Joe Biden becomes president, all of the scenarios that I've laid out for you today are going to come true tenfold. You are going to see an America that has been warned about for years and years and years. And you're going to see it come to life to a degree that has only existed in dystopian novels about the future. That's what you're going to see. Now, we said when we created Now the End Begins back in 2009, this is what we said that was coming. And we could see it very, very clearly. We anticipated that this would arrive under a Obama presidency. But Obama was simply there to put the framework in place. And all of the things that they do now, they're able to do because of the things that Obama put into place. But this is what we said back in the very beginning days of Now the End Begins. We said for generation the Bible has warned about the coming end of days, and you are now living in that time. America, a nation raised up by the hand of God to spread the gospel and to be a beacon of freedom for people around the world, is about to be forever silenced by those sworn to protect her leaders. And that's exactly what we said 11 years ago was coming. We are now on the very precipice of that happening. And not only of that happening, but it's going to be even worse than we said it would be. Because when I wrote that 11 years ago, there was no Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter was not created until the Obama years. When I wrote that 11 years ago, there was no Antifa. Antifa was created during the Obama years. When I wrote that 11 years ago, there was no ISIS. ISIS was created by the federal government under the Obama administration. Google that sometime and see what results that you get. But yes, during the Obama years, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, ISIS, legalized homosexual marriage, all the critical race theory, all of these things became institutionalized under the Obama presidency. So, if you think that your vote doesn't matter, you're insane. If you think that social media does not control national and international public thought, you are deceiving yourselves. We have an election in less than 3 weeks. And if Joe Biden wins, it's going to be a horror show, the likes of which you can't even begin to imagine. Did you know that both Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are 100% in favor of mothers being allowed to murder their babies after the babies are born? Do you know that in 2 states, Virginia and New York, that has already been signed into law? Can you imagine what would happen if these animals gain power? it's going to be the end, the absolute end. And with that, we have come to the end of our time for this show today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please share the link for this program on social media and see what happens. See what the fact checkers at Facebook say to you when you share this program on social media on Facebook. Even if you're allowed to share this program, I get lots of people who tell me I can't even share your links because Facebook won't let me. But try and share the link and see how far you can get. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Lord willing, we'll see you back here Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, for another edition of the Rightly Dividing Bible Study. Have a great and safe week, everybody.